Today on Notsam Wrestling, I believe that we are seeing the rise of the individual Jacob Fatu. An unprecedented partnership is formed between WWE and TNA. What can we expect? Saturday night's main event starts to take shape and a whole lot more. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling. The Royal Rumble is inching closer and closer. I hope you're going to join me out in Indianapolis the Thursday before the Rumble, January 30th. Helium Comedy Club, Notsam Wrestling Live. We've got guest discussions happening, and it is looking good. I think it's going to be a really fun time. You can get tickets at notsam.com. I hope you are there. We had a very eventful week. Of course, the emergency pod, or the bonus pod, I guess, because it took me a day to get it up, went up, chronicling the debut of Penta on Monday Night Raw. If you missed that, go back after today's show and watch that. We'll have plenty to talk about with Penta, but before we get there, I want to talk about what we saw on Smackdown, because last week we talked about the fact that we were due for some kind of bloodline answer. Of course, a lot of us are predicting a certain level of dissension in the ranks of the bloodline after what happened at Monday Night Raw with Solo Sikoa losing the Ulafala to Roman Reigns. Solo Sikoa, of course, was not on SmackDown last week. This week he was. So we see this wonderful match, Jimmy Uso versus Carmelo Hayes. That's going to be, I think, a journey and a story to watch on SmackDown, is the slow but steady rise of Jimmy Uso. I'm really interested because I don't think that this is a strap the rocket and here we go, we got a single star scenario with Jimmy Uso. Just as, by the way, it really wasn't with Jay either. It took quite a bit of time. I mean, think about how long ago it was that Jay Uso and Cody Rhodes were tag team partners, were the tag team champions on Monday Night Raw. And of course you're saying, well, if he's tag team champions with Cody Rhodes, it's kind of strapped the rocket to him. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. To take somebody out of a faction and then to team them with the biggest babyface, I don't think that's strapping the rocket. I think that's easing somebody into a different picture that doesn't include the people that surrounded them earlier. And then slowly but surely, Jay is on the rise until the last quarter of 2024 when he wins the Intercontinental Championship. By the time he gets to War Games, he's a massive star, and now he's going to Saturday night's main event and fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship. I think that a similar journey is going to be attempted with Jimmy Uso and turning him into SmackDown's big single-star Uso brother. And what I'm curious about is not what it's going to look like in a week, not what it's going to look like in a month, not what it's going to look like at the Rumble. I'm curious to look back on it at the end of this year. I'm very anxious to see where we find Jimmy Uso in the mix of things at the end of this year. Because what's going on now are the stories being told by the people that are the rivals of Jimmy Uso. In the immediate, we've got to talk about the new bloodline and where they stand. Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and of course, Jacob Fatu. Jimmy Uso's in this match with Carmelo Hayes. Here come Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga to interrupt the thing. Whole thing is a schmaz. Jimmy Uso takes a butt kicking, and here they are, and out comes Solo Sikoa, and Solo Sikoa's got his mock turtleneck on. He's got his red velvet coat on. And before he starts talking, Jacob spends a little bit of time on the microphone. And we've been seeing that a little bit more and a little bit more. You know, for a while, most of what we heard from Jacob Fatu was either one of these, or it was the beginning of those addresses that Solo Sikoa would make sitting at the table. And Jacob Fatu would kind of set the table, for lack of a better term, and start the thing before passing it off to Solo Sikoa. Then we started to hear Jacob Fatu a little bit more on the walks to the ring. That became Jacob's specialty. That as they walked to the ring, Jacob would talk down camera. And every time he did, people were like, oh my God, there's just something about the believability, the authenticity, the realness with which Jacob conducts himself that is, I mean, it's compelling to say the least. So here he is now in the ring, and Solo Sikoa comes out, and Jacob is still rocking that combat vest. And he tells everybody to shut the hell up. Solo Sikoa is about to speak. And so right there, we know that as Solo Sikoa is getting ready to speak, Jacob Fatu is still showing loyalty to Solo, whether that means anything or not. Before Solo has said anything, Jacob Fatu is trying to silence this crowd so that the great Solo may get off his chest what it is he needs to get off his chest, except he gives Solo the microphone. And these terrible fans, I believe it was San Diego, they won't stop booing Solo. They just boo him, boo him, boo him, which is great, of course. And Solo ends up dropping the mic and leaving. He takes his jacket off, he holds it over his shoulder, leaves through the audience, and walks out. And Jacob has this look on his face like it's not like this sort of over-the-top, outraged, you know exactly where he stands on the matter. He's just looking at Solo, almost like, what are you doing? It's almost like it's not the loss in the match that Jacob Fatu is going to have a problem with. Because right now, Solo has lost the Ula Fala, and Jacob has not expressed any doubt in Solo. But this idea that Solo is giving up on leading. And I think that's the key to what is about to happen and what the future of Jacob and Tama and Solo and all of that look like. Because Jacob picks up the mic after Solo leaves. And Jacob talks to the audience. And Jacob cuts this unbelievable promo. He starts talking about envy. Y'all envy me. And he says they have every reason to, because he can do everything that they can, and he will continue to do it. He's the man. He's just the man, this Jacob Fatu. And then he talks about this idea that he's crazy and that he's unpredictable and all these accusations that have been made really by the wise man Paul Heyman, but have become the characteristics that this character is known for. And he says, the crazy thing about this situation is that I'm just getting started. And so, first of all, that's just an awesome thing to say. But what struck me was that he didn't say, we're just getting started. He didn't say the bloodline is just getting started. He didn't say Solo Sikoa is just getting started. Jacob Fatu, with Tama Tonga behind him, once Solo leaves the building, is now not speaking for Solo Sikoa, is not speaking for the orders of the bloodline, is not speaking to the mission that the bloodline has in front of them. Solo Sikoa has left, and he's left Jacob Fatu with the opportunity where really, I would say for the first time, Jacob is speaking for himself. He didn't say we. He said I. I'm just getting started. And he's obviously got this backup with Tama Tonga, but now it's him. And LA Knight comes in the ring, and LA Knight catches a beatdown, and here comes Braun Strowman. And Braun Strowman, first Tama Tonga tries to stop Braun Strowman. Doesn't work. Braun Strowman tosses Tama Tonga aside. And then gets in the ring, and we see this awesome stare down with Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman. And Jacob, he starts doing that moving. He starts doing that dance. That combat dance. Before Tama Tonga pulls Jacob Fatu out of the ring and says, we out. But then we find out this is the match we're getting at Saturday night's main event. It's Braun Strowman versus Jacob Fatu. I think that what's clear to me about Jacob Fatu in the WWE is that he was not simply brought in to flesh out the new bloodline. He was not simply brought in to be a member of this new faction behind Solo Sikoa. That was the role that he had getting into WWE. That's not the reason. They didn't look at him and say, well, we're going to have him join the new bloodline, and that's it. I think before he even started, I think there's a reason why with this new bloodline, all the lumps that the new bloodline have taken, have really been taken by Tama Tonga and Tongaloa. Even Solo Sikoa has taken more lumps than Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu, from the first day he stepped foot in a WWE ring, has been very protected. I think the reason for that is you can't help but look at the guy and just see the ability to print money. I said this from the beginning. I feel it now more than ever, that Jacob Fatu is the evolution of his family, of the portrayal of his family as that unstoppable monster in the world of professional wrestling. That started with the Wild Samoans in the tag team division, that evolved into the Head Shrinkers, and to a lesser extent, I would say Yokozuna. And the only reason I say to a lesser extent is because he didn't portray a Samoan. We all know he was a Samoan. We all know he's Zeus. We all know Yokozuna is bloodline. And the way he moved was bloodline, and the way he did his thing and the dominance with which he did his thing was the evolution of those wild Samoans. And coming off of that, it goes to Umaga. And coming off of Umaga, the next stop is Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu has this Samoan heritage, the heritage of the monsters who came before him. But what makes him different is the contemporary shell that is the outside of Jacob. That Jacob Fatu is not this sort of monster from another land that we've never interacted with. Jacob Fatu has all the traits of those monsters, but is also the guy who you see when you walk into the wrong neighborhood, who is also the guy that just heard you asking for directions and is approaching, and you know, this is bad news. I should not have turned down that corner. That's Jacob Fatu. And so with this evolution, when we look at that, right, the Wild Samoans completely dominated multiple time WWE Tag Team Champions. Yokozuna, I mean, it took him, what, November, December, January, February, March, 5 months to win the WWE Championship. Umaga, how long did it take him before he's main eventing pay-per-views with John Cena? And now Jacob Fatu is next in that line. But Jacob Fatu, because he's got that level of special. The Wild Samoans were special. Yokozuna, special. Umaga, special. Like all three of those acts, you look at and go, only once, never before, never again. And I feel that same way about Jacob Fatu, especially this version that I'm seeing right now. I think that what we're seeing and what we saw on Smackdown is the beginning of Jacob's singular journey. I think that Jacob is not going to start a new bloodline. I think that there's a reason why when Jacob Fatu came in, he was associated with the Tongans as wild, violent, unpredictable, not fit to exist in society. And that's because ultimately, Solo Sikoa is going to have to answer for what it was stated he was doing. Paul Heyman said, you don't know what you're doing. This is dangerous. You shouldn't be doing it. Solo Sikoa has lost the Ulafala, but that prophecy, the prophecy of, I understand that they have your back, but you do not want to do this, Solo. That part has not been answered for. And I think that part is the next part that is going to be answered for. I don't think this is Jacob Fatu, and here's my bloodline. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think this is Jacob Fatu just asserting his dominance. And he happens to roll with a couple of Tongans who you wouldn't want to mess with. I think the next step is Jacob Fatu starting that journey for absolute supremacy. not making sure that his bloodline is on top, not making sure that everybody in his family is taken care of. None of that. Just Jacob taking everything from everyone. And it starts by taking out the leader. And that leader is Solo Sikoa. That is something I'm very interested to see. Because how do you turn Solo Sikoa, who did such a good job coming off of WrestleMania, of being an absolute villain? How do you make this Solo Sikoa a babyface like the rest of the bloodline is now? How can you possibly have Solo join up with the Usos, with Roman Reigns, with Sami Zayn? Roman Reigns, Sami Zayn, and the Usos are as beloved as anybody could be. But one of the things that made them that beloved was that their mission was to take out the Boy King, Solo Sikoa. So how do you twist that on its head? Because I don't see Jacob Fatu becoming the good guy here. Maybe he does, but I don't see it, only because I think that Solo Sikoa is right now. But the ultimate showdown is still Jacob Fatu versus Roman Reigns. And in the case of Jacob Fatu versus Roman Reigns ain't the bad guy. Roman Reigns is the hero. Jacob Fatu is the monster who may take the hero down. We're going back into Hogan territory now. When Hogan's whole MO as the ultimate good guy would be to stop monsters. WrestleMania 2, he had to stop King Kong Bundy. WrestleMania 3, he had to stop Andre the Giant. I would argue that Sergeant Slaughter was a monster in all the villainy that he stood for. He had to stop the Earthquake, who he didn't know if he was going to be able to stop the Earthquake. It was always about stopping a monster. Roman hasn't done that because Roman's been the monster for most of this. He turned the role over on its head, but now that he's a good guy, Jacob Fatu is that perfect monster that you look at and go, maybe Jacob is going to beat Roman Reigns. And maybe that is ultimately the task and the place for Roman Reigns, to clear the path for Jacob's utter dominance. So I think Jacob has to stay the villain if he's going to face Solo Sikoa. I don't see Solo Sikoa just kind of kowtowing and bowing to Jacob. I think that, and the way I would like to see it done, I think, is that Jacob Fatu and the Tongans do to Solo Sikoa what Solo Jacob and the Tongans did to Paul Heyman. I think that the only answer is for Solo to kind of take ownership, to acknowledge Roman Reigns, because to start the healing process, we have to see humility from Solo Sikoa, and we have to see him, acknowledge all this and go like, no, he's doing the right thing now. And he thinks that the new bloodline is with him, but they're not. They attack him. They put him through the table. He's off TV for a while so that we can get to the point where Solo comes out. Maybe the new bloodline is attacking whoever it is. LA Knight, Braun Strowman, whatever good guys they're attacking. And Solo Sikoa comes out and makes the save. And then I think the final step will be Solo Sikoa finding himself in somewhat of a similar position that Roman Reigns is in, where Roman Reigns doesn't have as many friends as maybe he would have if he had behaved differently over the 3.5 years that he was world champion. Well, now Solo Sikoa may be a good guy. Maybe he's trying to stop Jacob Fatu in his reign of terror, but he doesn't have any friends. The next beatdown happens. They try to put him off TV again, and that's when the Usos, maybe Roman Reigns as well, make the save. But I think ultimately it ends with Jacob proving dominant over Solo, because the next step is Roman Reigns versus Jacob Fatu. And I feel like if done the right way, that Roman versus Jacob Fatu could even be something that main events WrestleMania 42. I mean, if you lay that out the right way and you have Jacob doing whatever he's going to do after he takes Solo off TV and just the rise of Jacob, then Jacob versus Solo, and then we slowly get to Jacob versus Roman, I absolutely think. I mean, maybe you'll get it at SummerSlam. SummerSlam is 2 nights in a stadium, so maybe SummerSlam will be the time to finally do Jacob versus Roman. But I think it could even be stretched out all the way to next year's WrestleMania, and then you finally have the bloodline all back together, including Solo, with Roman on top. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just sprouting ideas because as I see what's going on with Jacob now, and as I see the match announcement being made for Saturday night's main event, we haven't seen Jacob Fatu. It's interesting that he hasn't had more matches. Jacob Fatu, he's been on TV every single week, but he hasn't had, comparatively speaking, that many matches, especially outside of bloodline-related matches. So I think that's what we're seeing. That's what I got from SmackDown this week. That's what I see going forward, is this rise of Jacob Fatu. I thought that SmackDown was great. I mean, and by the way, we're going to talk about Braun Strowman and Jacob for sure. We're going to talk about what Kevin Owens has going on at Saturday night's main event. I really enjoyed that last hour, especially. I thought SmackDown as a 3-hour show, it was cooking pretty well this week, I have to say. I enjoyed Ray coming out. We'll talk about the Royal Rumble in a little bit. I very much enjoyed Kevin Owens interrupting him and the shirt that he was wearing, the Canadian Dream, son of a security tech, whatever. It was great. It was great. A play off of the old Dusty Rhodes t-shirt, of course. Because then, I mean, the fact that Kevin Owens can wear that shirt, that means that for tonight, he can cut this promo on Rey Mysterio, but we know the shirt says it all, that the bigger story is what's cooking between Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes to be settled at the Royal Rumble. The Kevin Owens-Rey Mysterio match was awesome. To see Rey Mysterio in that spotlight and to have still seeing that guy have big matches that are on the level of the Kevin Owens match is it's so cool to me. Like, he's just, there's nobody like Ray. I still think he's tremendously underrated. I know sometimes I go on TV and say nasty things, but that's because I love Dominic so much. But Ray is just, I mean, he's 1 in a million. It's crazy the level that he's going. You go back to when he first debuted on SmackDown. He's still in 2025 having matches like he's having with Kevin Owens. So cool, and also amazing that that's the first time Kevin Owens and Ray have ever wrestled. And as big of a wrestling fan as Kevin Owens was coming into this industry, that had to be unbelievable for Kevin Owens. And then the use of the package pile driver, you know, to be the thing that draws Cody out from the back. I thought that was great. And then let's give full credit to the fact that Tiffany Stratton and Bayley went 20 minutes and Tiffany won clean. They went 20 minutes and Tiffany won clean. I mean, it's surprising to me that Tiffany is still like a heel, like a villain. Like, I wouldn't have expected that. That's not what I would have called. But regardless, just the fact that, like, I could have sworn that this match was going to go on at 10 minutes too and have, like, interference or have something else or whatever. But no, we just had Tiffany Stratton versus one of the best to do it in Bayley. And boom, 20 minutes in, Tiffany is able to get the W. It shows you how much faith there is in Tiffany Stratton and the vision that they have for the future and how much Tiffany has to do with that vision. Pardon the interruption, but getting high shouldn't be a guessing game. Choose the type of high you want with Via. Via makes award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes, topicals, drops, and more. Whether you're looking for some energy, better sleep, more intense focus, or recovery, Via has a product for you. You can build your own kit to be exactly what you want it to be. You choose your own effects. It's the best. Via is crafted from the highest quality hemp that's sourced from independently owned American farms. It's also legally ships to almost all U.S. states in discreet packaging. There's no medical card required, so you can get started right away. If you're 21 and up, check out the link to Via in our description and use the code NOTSAM to receive 15% off. And if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice. After your purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show and tell them that we sent you. Notsam Wrestling. This year, enhance your everyday with Via. So, yeah, real good stuff. Speaking of the future, of course, it's really creeping up on us. Saturday night's main event is already this Saturday, and a week after that is the Royal Rumble. I thought that, I still thought when people were, declaring for the Royal Rumble, it was going, we have plenty of time before the Rumble. But no, it's right around the corner. But Saturday night's main event, the second of the modern Saturday night's main events are even closer. I'll have my eyes glued to this show because I want to know. I mean, they got to turn Hulk Hogan heel, right? If Hogan's going to be on the show, and I don't know if he is, it's just that he's been in all the video packages, and they've got the sponsorship with the Hulk Hogan beer, the deal or whatever. I don't know if whatever. But, if Hulk Hogan is going to come out on the show, because now, even if you think, well, it depends on the location, it depends on this, it doesn't. Booing Hulk Hogan is now a thing. The gloves are off. This is what wrestling fans do. I mean, he got booed in Tampa. It's his hometown. He got booed in Tampa at WrestleMania, 37. And then he got booed at the building at Netflix Raw. Everybody saw it. It became a news story. It became a meme. He's getting booed. I feel like the only thing you could do with Hogan right now, if he's going to keep coming out, is put that NWO beard back on him, and Hollywood's got to come back, and he's got to lean in. He's got to tell him to stick it, because he's getting booed if he's coming out. They haven't announced that's happening, so I'm just saying if it does. But this is what they have announced for Saturday night's main event. Of course, as we were just talking, Braun Strowman versus Jacob Fatu, and I think this is the first match in that new era of Jacob Fatu. I think that this is sort of the coming out party of who Jacob Fatu is post new bloodline, who Jacob Fatu is beyond being the heavy for Solo Sikoa. Everything that we've seen, all the sort of potential that exists, now is the time that it kicks into gear. I would not be shocked at all to see Jacob Fatu get that, Big Daddy Cool Diesel / Kane / whatever position in the Royal Rumble, where he comes out and eliminates 11 people. Wouldn't shock me one bit if that position belonged to Jacob Fatu this year. But before we get to the Rumble, he's got Braun Strowman one-on-one, and I think Braun Strowman is a perfect opponent for Jacob in terms of showcasing who this guy is, right? Because Braun Strowman, because of injuries, because of whatever, has kind of been here and gone and here and gone. But he's such a physical specimen. First of all, he's a former champion. But second of all, he's such a physical specimen. I think Jacob Fatu wins this match. And the headline is, look at what Jacob was able to do to even Braun Strowman. This has nothing to do with size. This has nothing to do with stature. This has nothing to do with anything except when the bell rings and Jacob Fatu has permission to fight, whoever is in there with him is in grave danger. I think that this is one of those, everybody's on notice type of matches that 2025 is going to be a huge year for Jacob Fatu. You've got Braun Strowman versus Sheamus, which is not Braun Strowman, Braun Breaker. Both Brauns wrestling on Saturday night's main event. Big Saturday night for the Brauns. Braun Breaker versus Sheamus. I I don't see Sheamus winning that title, man. And they have teased it so much, and he has gotten so many opportunities, and every time it comes up, somebody says, well, Sheamus has never won the Intercontinental Championship. And that's true. And I think there is this section of the audience that really wants Sheamus to win that Intercontinental Championship, that really wants Sheamus to have that moment. But I don't think people want to see Braun Breaker lose. I don't want to see Braun Breaker lose. It was cool when he lost to Jey Uso. It was fine. Give Jey Uso that moment and let that continue to be a feather in Jey Uso's hat. Look, regardless of how long he held the Intercontinental Championship for, the fact is he was Intercontinental Champion, and the fact is he did what not many have, which is he beat Braun Breaker in a singles match for the championship. Let that be a feather in Jey Uso's hat. Let Braun Breaker hold on to that Intercontinental Championship for some time, because it just makes everything interesting. The idea of saying so-and-so would be a great Intercontinental Champion, this person would be a great Intercontinental Champion, that person would be a great Intercontinental Champion. All right, but that means they have to go through Braun Breaker. I think that Braun Breaker's second reign hasn't been quite established enough. I think Sheamus is going to put him through it. I think this is going to be the match that steals the show. I think Braun Breaker and Sheamus is going to be who was it? Sheamus and Gunther? I think it was Sheamus and Gunther, was it that? Yeah, at that first Clash at the Castle, the one that was headlined by Drew and Roman, it was Sheamus and Gunther. And I remember saying that, the physicality of that match ended up being like Shakespeare. I don't know if Braun Breaker versus Sheamus is going to be on the level of Gunther versus Sheamus, but I think that that's the bar, for lack of a better term, with Sheamus, that they're searching for. And I think that's where they're going to try to take this thing. And that the goal is for people tuning into Saturday Night's Main Event to see what Sheamus is capable of right now and how much potential there is in Braun Breaker. I think Braun wins, and I think Sheamus once again loses nothing. That's the thing. Sheamus has not won every single match he's been in since he came back after WrestleMania, except every match he's been in has been an absolute fight. Every match he's been in, he's left with welts. Every match he's been in has looked like the type of match you maybe want to have once a year and then take a lot of time off. And he's doing them on TV several times a month. So, I think this is going to be one of those matches, and it ends up being yet another match that Sheamus can lose and doesn't actually lose anything. That if you turned around a week later and said Sheamus getting another Intercontinental Championship match, you'd go, yeah, that makes sense, and I'm happy to see it. You got Jey Uso versus Gunther. I think a good match for Jey. I think a great David Goliath match. I think a great good guy, bad guy match. And I think I was going to say a match that Drew may interfere in, but but Gunther doesn't like interference. Remember when Finn Balor interfered? And maybe that's where you go, right? Maybe Drew does interfere, and Gunther has a problem with Drew interfering as well. And Gunther's kind of slow journey into being a babyface gets closer and closer, unless the goal is to have John Cena versus Gunther at WrestleMania, because if that's the case, you kind of want to keep Gunther a heel. So I think that there is, I could easily see interference, Drew McIntyre getting involved, somebody getting involved. Maybe even Jacob Fatu. But also, Gunther winning clean over Jey Uso, I don't think it would hurt Jey, and I think it might be real good for Gunther. I think it might be, especially because the last big title match he had against Damian Priest when Finn Balor interfered, even though it was made up for, it still was an interference thing. And I think Gunther's at his best when he's just fighting and winning matches clean. And that's also what's going to get him heat, man. That's what's going to get people to boo him, is if he just beats their hero. If he just nobody wants to see Jey Uso lose. If Gunther and Jey Uso make us believe that it could happen, and then Gunther just beats Jey Uso, I think that's a cool thing. I think that might be where I would want it to go. And then the fourth thing announced for Saturday Night's Main Event, and I'm sure they will announce more, is Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes signing their contract for the Royal Rumble with Shawn Michaels presiding over. Now, of course, they're in San Antonio for Saturday night's main event, so it's only smart that they bring in Shawn Michaels to do something, and I think that this is a good position for him to be in. I've liked how Shawn Michaels has been used on NXT television, where the credibility that he earned in his wrestling career as Shawn Michaels kind of still shines through. There's not only a respect, even on camera, that these characters have for Shawn Michaels, but the idea that he could still get physical. Because we never saw, that one match we don't really talk about, the tag match with The Undertaker Kane, we don't really talk about that match. Other than that match, we never really saw Shawn Michaels wrestle past when he should have been wrestling, except for that one match. We don't really talk about that match. So it's left you to this place where you're like, I'll bet if Shawn put the tights back on, he has one more left in him. There's this thing. Shawn is one of those guys that you think if he put the tights on, he might have one more in him. And that vibe lends to a certain, not only credibility, but an ability to talk to NXT superstars as an authority figure in a certain way, because he can also kick ass. And I think that he's going to carry that with him into San Antonio with Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes. I do wonder, because it's San Antonio and Kevin Owens loves being a bad guy, if Shawn is the victim of some physicality. There's no way he'll take a pile driver. I wonder if he takes some kind of a stunner maybe, and then Kevin Owens goes for the pile driver before Cody stops him. He was about to pile drive Shawn Michaels. I think that would probably be a good way to go. But yeah, of course, because this goes back to SmackDown and Nick Aldis trying to get Kevin and Cody to both sign the deal, and neither one of them would sign before the other signed. So Shawn Michaels is going to make it all happen, and yeah, I think it'll be a great show. It'll be a fun show, and I'm sure that I don't know. Actually, I haven't spoken to Megan, but maybe we'll have to do a little Saturday night's main event instant react show coming up this weekend. Huge news in the last week, which some people called for an emergency podcast to cover it, and the only reason that I didn't was because I wanted to make sure I had something to talk about here on Notsam Wrestling. If I just do emergency podcasts about every topic all week long, we're going to get to Monday morning, and it's like we already talked about it. We said it all. The big news, of course, is that WWE and TNA have made it official. WWE and TNA have entered in to an official, on-paper, press-released, multi-year partnership that will see superstars from TNA and NXT being part of a talent exchange. And at the time that I'm talking to you, I have not yet seen TNA's pay-per-view from this weekend, so maybe we'll jump on and talk about that in the future. But I think this is a really amazing thing. WWE has a history of working with other promotions, whether it was, Jerry Lawler and USWA, whether it was Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain, whether it was Paul Heyman and ECW, but never officially. Never like this is an official partnership going forward for years. It was always just like, for the time being, we're doing this. Or, yeah, you can bring that guy in, we'll bring in that guy type of thing. Now it's like, no, this is going to go on for the foreseeable. And I think there are many levels that this is extremely exciting. I think it's going to be amazing for those one-off matches or even stories, right? Because what's fun about NXT is they kind of work with premium live events on the old school WWE schedule, where they do a premium live event every 2 to 3 months. So there is this version of, let's say, whether it's Nick Nemeth's, FKA Dolph Ziggler coming into NXT, that's realistic now, which is nuts because he got released. And now the idea that as TNA champion, he comes over to NXT, I think that'd be amazing because he did get released, but he still remains, absurdly popular amongst WWE fans. Everybody loves Dolph Ziggler. But even other people, you could bring in Moose. You saw Masha Slamovich in the crowd on NXT this week. The idea of bringing those talents in to build up to a premium live event match and having them on the show over the course of those 2 months building up to that premium live event, it's just a fun scenario to think about. And what if? What if there's a North American Championship match and somebody like Moose is able to win that North American Championship? And then that NXT North American Championship is now on TNA Impact every week, or is on a TNA pay-per-view, or whatever it is. And an NXT superstar has to go over to TNA to get the title. I saw Jordynne Grace tweeting out that she wanted to see an Ultimate X match at WrestleMania. Who's to say, it'll start on NXT, of course. And maybe that's something that we see at an NXT Stand and Deliver premium live event. But if it gets really popular, if it gets really over, who's to say that that won't come to a WWE premium live event, to a WrestleMania, to a whatever? I think, the ability to scout talent and for there to be a path. That's what WWE has really been doing, is creating paths for talent to get into WWE. It's like they don't want it to seem like the great and powerful Oz, where who even knows how to get there? And even if you can get there, how do you get past the big iron door? That was how WWE, I think, for a lot of people felt for a long time. Now, whether it's the NIL program, whether it's the WWE ID program, whether it's the partnership with TNA, they're building all these paths. And I think that that's not so that everybody just gets to go to WWE. I think that's so WWE can maintain this awareness of everything going on in the world of wrestling and college athletics. And the best of the best end up coming into WWE. And there's no sort of, we're only getting people under 25. We're only getting athletes. We're only getting indie wrestlers. We're only getting people over 35. No. We're looking at all streams and picking the best from each stream as it comes in. And I think that that's what this all is. And it's also this move, which WWE has talked about before, of keeping the industry healthy. This deal directly helps TNA. I think the WWE ID deal, when you find out that somebody is under a WWE ID deal, there are super wrestling fans that want to go to independent wrestling shows so they can be able to say, I saw this person before he was on Raw, before he was on Smackdown, before he was at SummerSlam. And so it's also, in theory, helping the independents. So now they figured out a way where it's like WWE benefits, but at the same time is helping prop up TNA, is helping prop up the independents, is helping, prop up athletes and making it feel like there is a way to get here. It also, opens the door wide open. And I think that there's a lot of people that helped get all this done, right? I think Jordynne Grace was a huge help. I think Joe Hendry was a huge help of seeing it really helps TNA to show their talent on NXT, to send NXT talent over there. It's very helpful to TNA, but we're also benefiting from it quite a bit. And it makes things exciting, I think that it's also really great for, going back to the NIL program and the college athletes who haven't done any professional wrestling before, to get to go in there and do professional wrestling, to get to go and not just, learn in the Performance Center, do some NXT shows, and now they're expected to prosper on Monday Night Raw, but they can get out there and wrestle in front of a TNA audience. Who knows? Maybe start to drift towards an independent wrestling audience as well, and have that experience of feeling every different type of audience. And so when that audience starts to react to things, no matter what town you're in, no matter how the audience is feeling that night, you start to become more aware. You start to know what to do in what situations. Getting reps for NXT talent that has very little pro wrestling experience, I think is immeasurably great. But I think for us, for wrestling fans, it's just super fun because it allows us, what's rule number 2? Speculate wildly. It allows the wild speculation of the century. It allows us to go like it's all possible all of a sudden. What if there's a pay-per-view that's TNA versus NXT and we get to fantasy book this whole show? We can sit there and watch somebody getting over. What if Out the Mud, who's getting over in the tag division in NXT, what if we go, okay, well, the way I would have them do is I'd have them go to TNA and win the TNA Tag Team Championship. What if Oba Femi, as the NXT World Champion, goes through every NXT superstar you can imagine, and is the dominant NXT champion. And we go, well, there's nothing more for Obafemi to do. He's beaten everybody. Well, now, instead of just saying, well, I bet he's going to show up on the main roster soon. What if he then turns around and goes to TNA? What if he's the first person to hold the NXT championship and the TNA championship at the same time? And then you've built up this incredible buzz where the whole wrestling world is fully taking notice. It really seems like with moves like this, where we used to hear that WWE was this closed system that really only prioritized their own stuff. And the idea was to teach people to become a WWE superstar. Just that's what we're concentrating on, being a WWE superstar. I think that the walls have opened up. And now it's like, yes, we want you to be a WWE superstar, but we also want you to be a professional wrestler. We want you to learn how to be a pro wrestler so that you can be the most effective WWE superstar possible. And I think that benefits the WWE in the sense that the product can then evolve as audiences evolve. But I also think it really benefits the people who are under these deals, because if WWE, let's say, is done with them, right? Like, okay, it's not working out right now. They release them. Maybe you'll be back in 2 years. Maybe you'll be back in 6 months. Who knows? But they've now got this pro wrestling training under their belt where if they leave the WWE system and it's all they've known, they also learned in TNA. They also learned here. They also learned from Gabe. They also, there's just so much that they're not on an island anymore. And I think that that's a good thing. We'll be right back, but first, I got some advice. Kickstart your mornings with Huel, the easiest way to get all the nutrients you need to perform at your very best. Huel is a total meal in a bottle. It's available in both chocolate and vanilla. It's high in protein. It's low in sugar. It tastes like a milkshake. It's amazing. If you're too busy to get your meal in, don't skip it. Grab a Huel. That's what I do. If you haven't tried the Black Edition Huel, it has 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins, and minerals all in one bottle. No more being late for work because you had to cook breakfast or eating greasy drive-through for lunch. Huel makes eating well, easy, and delicious. Take the leap and join the community of Hueligans with this exclusive offer for new customers of 15% off plus a free gift with the code NOTSAM at Huel.com. Get 15% off plus a free gift for new customers with code NOTSAM at Huel.com. Start your year off strong with Huel. Nutritionally complete meals in minutes so you can focus on what really matters. I thought, as I said in the bonus pod this week, you all know that I loved the debut of Penta in the WWE. It's kind of like a how-to in debuting a new superstar in the WWE, for sure. I mean, when people say, WWE knows how to create a star, this is the prime example of it. I mean, immediately. From the pyro to the strut to the entrance to the match to the whole thing. I think that people got into the hype, which is very good. But I think there were a lot of people watching that maybe have never seen Penta before. There are plenty of people watching WWE that didn't watch Lucha Underground, that didn't watch AEW, that haven't seen him in Impact or AAA. They just watch WWE because it's like, the thing. But I think that when you look at him, there's something appealing, I'm sure that there are people who bought Penta merchandise without ever seeing a Penta match because it was on sale before his debut. And it's like a debut like that makes you a super fan instantly. When you can get a superstar on TV like that, build the right amount of hype so that people are paying attention in the right way. Put the merch out early so that people already are financially invested in this character being cool. And then present him in the best possible way and have him wrestle this great match against Chad Gable, who is like, he's in my Seth Rollins camp of one day he'll get all the flowers that he truly deserves. But when when Penta's cutting that promo, all I can think of was they hit it on every level. Great entrance, great match, great promo, and in one section of that television show, it's told you everything you need to know. There's no learning curve with Penta. You're just watching and going like, I think that's my new favorite wrestler. I love that dude. Kids are watching going, Penta rules. Adults are watching and going, I think I'd heard of this guy. Man, this guy's awesome. And that's what it is. And people bring up, people will compare Penta to whatever, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Jade Cargill, to say, this is what happened. This is what can happen when you go to the WWE. You get presented like a real star. You get the machine put behind you, and boom, we're off to the races. But I think I think that's a little bit of a simplistic way to look at it, just because of where everybody came from. I think that more accurately, Penta is this shining example of the way talent is presented in the WWE now, which is the stuff you did before matters. Everything counts. If you've already built a brand that has value, we can use that. We don't need to start from scratch. We don't need to take Penta, change his name to something weird, and make him a cartoon character. That stuff that you were doing that attracted our attention, that fans were cheering for elsewhere, that's why you're here. That's why it attracted our attention. We want you to do that, and we're just going to, do our thing with it. I think Penta, similar things with like Jacob Fatu coming in and being like, no, man, we've seen what you do. Do what you do. And we'll just make it bigger. And Triple H has been doing this for some time. If you go back into NXT, when Triple H only had his hands really on NXT, you could see it was happening. The original inception of Karrion Kross was really just Killer Kross turned up. Kevin Owens was really just Kevin Steen turned up. All of this stuff. I mean, Samoa Joe just came in as Samoa Joe and wrecked people as Samoa Joe. And when they got to the main roster, it was like, this had worked so well in NXT, let's just have him do that. But the reality was that I think Triple H, if what you're doing outside of the WWE, if Triple H sees it as something that could be a valuable part of the show that WWE is putting on, why tinker with it? Do that, and we'll just make it bigger. And I think that is what Penta is really that great example of. Do what you do, and we are going to put it on as big a pedestal as we can possibly put it on. And I think the synergy there is just going to make everybody money, and it does. And it's worked far more often than it hasn't. And I would say, I would have to do some research if you wanted to challenge me on this. But I think there are more examples of that way of doing things being successful than there are of people who are already successful starting from scratch and still being successful. I think there are far more examples of people going like, look, man, you're already successful. Let's just turn it up a notch. And I think that's what you got with Penta. And I think it's really cool. Who knows? I'm talking about Jacob Fatu being in the Royal Rumble in the Kane spot. Maybe Penta. Penta's got to be in the Royal Rumble, right? I mean, if this is a showcase, right? And ultimately, I feel like the best Royal Rumbles end up being showcases of what the WWE has to offer right now. I think you got to put Penta in that Royal Rumble match just for the visual, right? Jacob Fatu is just such a visual. Throwing in, Jacob and Penta and all these different examples of what is on this TV show, I think could make this Royal Rumble very special. We got more big names. So last week, we had 3, although only 2 had been officially announced on the graphic. CM Punk had said that this was his plan, but he hadn't officially declared until Raw, when it was CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, and Seth Rollins. All 3 of them in there, all 3 of them intertwined in various different ways. Of course, Seth and Punk, Drew and Punk, Drew and Seth going back to WrestleMania. All of it. It's great. But all three of them declare for the Royal Rumble in a very, very tense moment on that episode of Monday Night Raw. And then we go over to SmackDown, and the open of that show before Kevin Owens interrupts is Rey Mysterio declaring for the Royal Rumble. And I really liked that when Rey declared for the Royal Rumble, speaking of putting things on a pedestal, that they made Rey seem like a big deal. They made Rey announcing that he was going to be in the Royal Rumble this year a big deal. They went back and had Rey tell the story of like entering into the Royal Rumble that he won, and it brought you back to the days of Rey being the world champion, and it makes you question, like, what if Rey got one more run? What if Rey had one more in him? And while he's not, on my 5 most likely to win, it's still just the idea of that being out there. I mean, why not? Everybody that's in that match, if there's any way to present them as somebody that could win this match, present them as somebody that could win this match. Rey coming in and reminding you that he has won the match before, and when he did, he won the world championship. I think Jey Uso coming in and telling that story of being that underdog. Rey may have won, but Jey Uso, you could argue, is the Rey Mysterio of 2025 in the sense that just he's got all this fan support behind him, and in any other time, you might have scoffed at the idea of him becoming the world champion. But wouldn't it be great if he main evented WrestleMania? Everybody should have a story to tell where you can kind of believe it. So then you can have your favorites and your dark horses. And what if he won? But what if he won? I think when you look at the names of the people who are officially in the match, we're at Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, John Cena, Roman Reigns, and Rey Mysterio. That's only 6 so far that have been officially announced. I think you got to have Jacob. You got to have Penta. Got to have Dominic Mysterio in there, right? You got to... This is like, even with only 6 names announced, this is the first Royal Rumble in years that it feels like with these 6, I don't really think we need surprises. I think we should still have them, and it's always going to be fun, and it's going to be great. I don't know, maybe Bubba Ray Dudley comes out, Bubba Ray kind of officially rejoining the family by being a special referee at WrestleMania, then having that short run with NXT leading up to the ECW Arena show. And Bubba Ray has made a surprise return in a Rumble before. Maybe we get a Bubba Ray Dudley return. As I said last week, Goldberg is a name that's being thrown out there. Brock Lesnar is a name that's been thrown out there. I mean, that's one of those things that if Brock Lesnar returns as a surprise, now you're talking about a surprise that's not just, oh, it's so cool he's back. It's, oh my God, he might win this thing. Are you going to put the Intercontinental Champion in there? Are you going to put Braun Breaker in there? Maybe Jey, after losing at Saturday night's main event, Jey Uso says, this is my only, I got to win now. I lost to the champion. He's not going to give me a rematch. But if I win the Royal Rumble, he has to. Is Logan Paul going to be in the match? There's so many options that it's almost like if we didn't have a surprise this year, it'd be fine. Just because the amount of potential, the amount of stories that you could tell within this Royal Rumble match, it's kind of phenomenal, Speaking of phenomenal, I just did it to myself. What if AJ Styles? I don't know what his schedule is like in terms of his injury recovery and all that. But AJ Styles returning as a surprise. That would be a hell of a surprise. And AJ Styles is a guy who could conceivably win. What if the main event of WrestleMania is Gunther versus AJ Styles? You wouldn't want to watch that? I would. There's so much that can be done, but the star power is just outrageous. And speaking of star power, we officially got the tease. The teases on social media have been out there. Charlotte is coming back. And it started on social. Charlotte had posted videos, so we all or photos, so we all knew that she was at the Performance Center. Charlotte had posted videos that were kind of hinting at a comeback and the training that she's doing and everything, but we got a vignette on SmackDown proper. We didn't get a date, we didn't get any of that stuff, but it was Charlotte Flair And it was made clear. Tess even brought it up on commentary that she is coming back. I thought the vignette was very Charlotte, but amped up. It was like, hey, in case you all forgot, like I run this whole division. Look at all the items that I've purchased based on my successful wrestling career. You guys don't have all these items. Charlotte Flair, I could tell from the vignette, very wealthy. Financially, she is set. Driving an expensive car, hanging out with a private jet, hanging out on a boat. Boats cost a lot. That's why they say, when they are talking about a lot of money, they say a boatload of money. Because that's how much boats cost. No problem for Charlotte Flair. Look, I think Charlotte Flair coming back is going to be big for the women's division, big for the women's division on SmackDown. And she's been gone long enough that we can have a conversation about where she even really fits in this women's division. You know, where does she line up? Who is she going to go after? There were rumors over the last week about there being a plan for Charlotte Flair versus Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania. I mean, some people were like, oh, it's the first I've heard about it this week. Other people listen to Notsam Wrestling and know that I've said that for months. Like, that's the WrestleMania match that I want. Charlotte Flair versus Tiffany Stratton. Of course, there are people who are saying Charlotte Flair might be the one that did in Jade Cargill, that threw her on the car, but I don't see that. I don't see that as feasible right now. It could be, but I just don't see it. I see the destination being Charlotte Flair versus Tiffany Stratton. And maybe the way you get there is a Royal Rumble win for Charlotte Flair. Maybe the way you get there is an Elimination Chamber win for Charlotte Flair. But also, if that's the WrestleMania match, we've got a long time before WrestleMania. What is Charlotte Flair going to be doing when she gets back to SmackDown? Is she going to be in the conversation for the United States Championship? I don't think so, but it's possible. Maybe she starts something with who? Nia Jax? You know, maybe she comes back. I don't know, because I'm very surprised that Tiffany Stratton is a villain. I figured for sure they were just going to officially turn her babyface, but it seems like they're working hard to make sure that everybody knows that Tiffany Stratton is a villain, which is just a weird thing because I think people really want to cheer Tiffany Stratton. They love her. So, maybe there's a bigger sort of turn coming where you can have Charlotte Flair. But the idea of Tiffany versus Charlotte Flair is like, the reason that it's perfect is because it's Charlotte Flair stepping back into a WWE ring, saying, I have not given up my throne, so it's time to get my crown back, and not realizing that she's stepping into a different era than the one that she was the queen of. That, to me, is what's so compelling. That while Charlotte is gone, everything has changed. That it's a different era. There are fans that are watching now that weren't really watching when Charlotte was there. The growth in the fan base has been serious. So it's almost, and then Tiffany Stratton can say, you know, okay, you know, you're ready to take what's yours back, except it's not yours anymore. And here we go. We're off to the races. Now, I do think that it's interesting that we have these vignettes for Charlotte Flair, who's very luxurious, but nothing for Becky Lynch. A lot of people theorized that Becky would be back for Netflix Raw. She was not. She was not. No mention of her last week on Raw. Like, there is no mention of her on SmackDown. Like, there's nothing. There are photos of Becky and Seth together. Becky is in some of the publicity stuff for Netflix Raw, but nothing together. Now, I feel like where it all leads is where we kind of have talked about ad nauseum, which is, I thought it was going to be reversed. I thought Becky Lynch comes back on Raw, enters the Royal Rumble. She comes out number 1. Charlotte Flair comes out as the surprise number 2. But maybe it's reversed. Maybe Charlotte Flair, and it would have to probably be next week on SmackDown. Maybe the vignette says that she returns at the Royal Rumble. And maybe Charlotte Flair returns, and then Becky Lynch is back to spoil it. And then we get that Charlotte Flair-Becky Lynch interaction, and then that goes away because Charlotte's on SmackDown and Becky's on Raw. Now, interesting, too, by the way, that on Monday Night Raw, that it was announced that the Wyatt Six We're now on SmackDown. We did not see any Wyatt Six representation on SmackDown. So I guess that Final Testament Wyatt Six story has kind of gone away. I'm interested to see what they do on SmackDown. It kind of feels like they should go after DIY, no? Because DIY have been so manipulative and stuff. I don't know, but I thought that was interesting. But, that's a different topic altogether. But yeah, so I guess, although it's almost like if we're not going to see Charlotte until the Royal Rumble, and then we finally see her, and then the very next thing is Becky Lynch comes back, it kind of spoils it for Charlotte. And that could be used as a story, but also it's real life. So I'm intrigued by the Becky Lynch thing. I'm very intrigued, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing Charlotte Flair return to the WWE. I think it's going to get really interesting to see where Charlotte fits in with this kind of current day women's division, where you've not only got a whole bunch of new women, but you've got Rhea Ripley on one show, who has absolutely, taken the throne of the biggest female star in the wrestling industry. On the other show, you got somebody who's brand new as women's champion, and both shows have a secondary champion. You got a United States champion in Chelsea Green and Lyra Valkyria, your first ever women's intercontinental champion. So where does Charlotte Flair fit? We will see. We will have to wait and see. If you know, email in notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's notsamwrestling@gmail.com. It's the way we communicate. We can also communicate if you come to Indianapolis on Thursday, January 30th for the live Not Sam Wrestling podcast. It'll be great. I hope to see you there. You can get tickets at notsam.com. Avik writes in, notsamwrestling@gmail.com, by the way, is the email address. Notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Hey, Sam, what's the haps from London? Which was your favorite Royal Rumble that you watched as a fan at the time, and why? I watch every Royal Rumble as a fan. For me, it was 1997. Nobody thought Austin would win. Yeah, but it was a little wonky, too. It was like the Final Four year. I think it has to be 92, right? It's hard. 2020 was great. 2020 was great. 92 was really great. Yeah, 2002 was great. We talked about it last week, I think. There are a lot of good Rumbles. Let's go to T-Rock. First off, I most definitely acknowledge you as my podcast tribal chief. Yeah. You solo! Last week's episode, you talked a lot about the men's Royal Rumble and how it could be massive, and I agree with everything you said there for the most part, and definitely excited for it. But I have a feeling that the women's Royal Rumble may be just as good, if not even better, than the men's this year. That's a big statement with the names that we have. With the women's division in NXT being the best it's been in a long time, and often touted as the best in wrestling, my imagination is running wild as to the stare downs we may see in that match. There's a lot of staring. And what WWE may try to seed for the future for WrestleMania 41. Not to mention, we know Becky signed a new deal. We don't know that. You read it on the internet, but we don't know. We're not her lawyer. And can possibly return during the Rumble, as well as maybe Charlotte Flair and the ongoing rumors of AJ Lee. Those would all be great returns. I would love to see a stare down. Enough with the stare downs between AJ Lee and Roxanne. Will Asuka return? And we get a damage control. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, the women's Royal Rumble has the potential to, like, almost reintroduce the whole division. Like, what happens if post-Royal Rumble you have Charlotte, you have Becky, you have Asuka. Who knows when Jade Cargill comes back? What if we get AJ Lee at some point? There are so many people that could get thrown back into this women's division all of a sudden, along with NXT. The talent that is pouring from both the NXT and the main roster, Raw and SmackDown women's divisions would be insane. Let's go to Tall. Just listened to the emergency Pentapod and had many of the same feelings as you did. One thing I noticed is that Penta was given a bunch of time to speak purely in Spanish. Admittedly, I'm in my second wrestling fandom era after taking years off, only to come back strong during the pandemic, thanks in large part to my OTP. I love you, Sam. I appreciate that. Your original podcast tribal chief here, OPTC, original podcast. Yep. And became truly locked in after that Lucha Brothers Young Bucks pay-per-view cage match a few years ago. But I cannot recall seeing anyone on WWE programming doing a foreign language promo like that. Do you think it's a purposeful effort to engage other countries in this new Netflix era? Can you speculate wildly on what other wrestlers might now be welcome to the WWE to truly attract fans in other countries such as India, Japan, and Mexico? Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good thing to point out, but Nakamura's been doing promos in Japanese for a little bit now. You know, I think there have been some Spanish-speaking promos. I think there is sort of, with the lean into really making WWE a more global product, I think that there is a lean into being like, hey, just speak in your natural language. I also, though, think that from a creative point of view, from a fan connection point of view, when you're hearing somebody speak in their natural language, whether you know what they're saying or not, sometimes, like, you knew what Penta was saying. Whether you spoke Spanish or not, you kind of got it. Because he was speaking from the heart, because he was speaking in his native tongue. It wasn't somebody else's words. He wasn't trying to get out a script. It was just, he was telling you what he was thinking at the time. And I think that sometimes that connects, whether it's in your primary language or not. Sometimes that connects better than it would if it were translated. Cal in Australia writes in, if you were to turn CM Punk heel in 2025, how would you do it? I think Punk as a heel is top tier, but I can't imagine a scenario where the crowd would turn on him at this point. Surely there's a way. P.S. Your storytelling and breakdowns are too good. WWE needs you on their creative team. Love the podcast. I got too much podcasting to do. How would I turn CM Punk heel? I think Punk could be a heel against Cody. I think Punk could be a heel against Roman. You know, and just a matter of almost doing it not too dissimilarly from what Kevin Owens did. Like just doing things in a way where he didn't completely betray who he is, so it's still a believable thing that you're following, but it is this thing of you did that without honor. You know what I mean? Like the honor that you had was kind of gone. I think CM Punk is very capable of being a heel in 2025 if that's what he wants to do. You know, I don't know. There's no reason to do it right now because people love CM Punk and there's plenty of stories to tell with him not as a bad guy. But it's like, and I also think you almost have to prove that he is a good guy before he can become a bad guy. You know, I think you have to make sure that there is no doubt as to his level of commitment and ability. And once that has all been sort of solidified, then you can do whatever you want with the character. And I think he's capable of it. But I think Roman and Cody would both be people that Punk could be a heel against. John writes in, how do you feel about the tension they are now showing between Liv and Dom? She was so excited because even if Liv lost to Rhea, that meant that Liv and Dom could finally be together without stage 5 clinger Rhea anymore and go on like Bonnie and Clyde, creating all sorts of mischief on Raw. But then the WWE does that tease about a breakup, which has her heartbroken. My daughter says Liv and Dom should just be getting started as their chemistry on screen is off the charts. I told her I think Liv and Dom are using the tension as a ruse to finally kick out or at least turn on Finn Balor. For my daughter's sake, I hope that's it. What say you? I don't know, man. I don't want Liv and Dom to be over. I'm a Liv Dom guy, you know, that is. But if I'm looking at this from a non-emotional point of view, there may be something to Liv going off on her own. At some point, it can't be about the relationship. And the Liv Dom relationship is predicated upon the Liv Morgan revenge tour. The Liv Dom relationship from the beginning has been predicated upon Liv taking everything away from Rhea Ripley. So it made sense if she has the Judgment Day, the title, and Dominic. She doesn't have the title. Yet another Judgment Day breakup is being teased, which who knows, because that's been teased before and they don't break up. But it's almost like if the Liv Rhea story is over, what's next for Liv and Dom? Because if they don't have that protagonist, who are they antagonizing? Who really is there anybody else in the division that would be actively upset about the two of them together? Because if not, then what's the story that you're telling? And I'm all for keeping them together because I love the act. But what's the story that you're telling, I think, is the real question. Nick writes in, I acknowledge you as the only podcast tribal chief with your 3 rules when it comes to wrestling, which is watch the product, speculate wildly, and everything counts. I had an interesting idea. Since this year's Royal Rumble will make it 10 years since Roman won the Royal Rumble, if we do Roman and Cody 3, what do you think of people interfering, but to make sure Roman loses instead of Cody? With his loss, with The Rock coming in and taking the necklace about Roman versus Rock. Well, here's the thing. I get what you're saying, right? It's like, it would be interesting if Drew and Seth and KO and this kind of anti-bloodline crew came in to stop Roman from winning the title. Except all of them have a problem with Cody. And Cody can't win because of interference, because then, like, you go off the air and the good guy hasn't won. And Cody shouldn't be a bad guy. So I get what you're saying in terms of, like, you know, what goes around comes around. But I think if the match is Roman and Cody and it's a WrestleMania main event, it's not the time for what goes around comes around. Because then ultimately, even if you like the idea, the story is still about Roman Reigns, as not about Cody at all at that point. And it's like, you never want to end the show with the person holding the title up, but the story's not about them. It doesn't matter. Story's about the other person. You don't want to end WrestleMania like that, I don't think. Camden writes in, love your breakdown of The Rock evolving over the years depending on how the crowd reactions. So one thing I've not seen speculated online is that, let's say The Rock is a go for WrestleMania. You have Roman win the Rumble, then The Rock, the final boss, either take or make Roman give him the title shot against Cody, since he lost to Cody last year. It would be similar to last year, what they did at first with the Cody and The Rock, and while also building on a future Rock. Why would Roman do that? Like, you're not... What do you mean The Rock makes Roman give him the title match? Well, how could The Rock make Roman give him the title match? Why would he do that? First of all, if there's anything that's been learned from last year, it's that The Rock can't make people give him a title match. He didn't get the title match at WrestleMania because he tried to make Cody give him the title match, and Cody said, how about no? So if I'm Roman Reigns and The Rock says, well, I'm getting the title match, I go, oh, I remember last year. I'll just say this. How about no? And then The Rock doesn't have the title match. The Rock doesn't even have a favor from Paul Heyman. I mean, maybe you say Roman wins the Rumble, Roman Cody 3, but then CM Punk calls in his favor, and Paul Heyman uses underhanded tactics to get the contract away from Roman Reigns and give it to CM Punk. Now we've got a conversation at least. Not that I'm advocating for that to happen, but we at least have a conversation to say, and then The Rock makes Roman give him his title match. It's like, why? Roman would just be like, no. Like, you literally put the Ulafala around my neck. I'm the tribal chief. You would then have to go into Roman versus Rock. And also to like go like, hey, remember when we tried to do a thing last year before WrestleMania and everybody said no so much we had to change it? Let's do that again. Let's try to do the thing that we were doing. No. The first thing we were doing that everybody said we hate this and then they made us change it. Let's just try to do it again. What are we talking about? Camden? Come on, dude. What are you, nuts? Sean writes in, Sam, huge fan of WWE and your show. I love the insight and fantasy booking that you do. Thank you. With that being said, if you are ever traveling to the Massachusetts area, I own a cake company. Oh. I would love to make you one absolutely free of charge. Thank you very much. Sean, I'll let you know if I'm ever there. Alex writes, Alexander, sorry, let's keep it formal. Good evening, my PTC. Paul Heyman was recently on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, where he reflected on the night at Madison Square Garden where he was put through the table. He said something that caused me to immediately start asking the question, how did Solo Sikoa and the new bloodline even acquire the Ulafala to begin with? At the 36:50 mark in the video, he says, that's not bad enough. Jacob Fatu hands Solo the Ulafala. Where did you get this? I mentioned that all to ask, does this apply to rules? Is this part of the product? And ultimately, what are your thoughts on the matter? Did Solo steal it while Roman was in the shower after losing to Cody at WrestleMania 40? Thank you for, I mean, I guess it's a question, but at this point, it's almost like it's fair to ask. And the answer could just be, well, I took it from Roman. You know, I don't know. Roman's already gotten it back. So if we were going to address that question, it's almost like, let's address it unless you tell me that Jacob or the Tongans took it and it's going to add to the story of Jacob or the Tongans. It's like everything does count, but attach this to a character and tell me how it's going to further the character. Because we don't just need answers for the sake of answers. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need answers for the sake of answers in my day-to-day life. If the car was, left unlocked, but nobody broke in and it doesn't matter, and then I go to work, I drive the car to work, I'm not coming home at the end of the day going, hey, why was the car unlocked? Because it doesn't matter. Ultimately, at the end of the day, who cares? I'm not going to waste my time with it. So, yeah, I mean, unless it leads to something that matters, I don't know. Maybe that's just one of those questions that we will continue to speculate wildly upon. Okay, last email. Let's go to Cynthia from Cleveland. Hey, Notsam. Just got back into wrestling in 2021. Okay. Started watching Attitude Era stuff and heard about The Rock's cousins and became a Bloodline fan overnight because of the storytelling. That's so fun. So you're telling me this is an Attitude Era fan and she's going like, Rock's got cousins? Let me see these cousins. And boom, here we are. She didn't know old Papa H was cooking. She didn't know. Anyway, I'm emailing to acknowledge my podcast tribal chief and to give my take on the high chief and the final boss. I'm glad he came back and embraced the babyface because everyone is cheering. But in my gut, it's telling me he is the puppet master to Drew, to Kevin Owens, to the new bloodline, all to come back around to Cody and Roman. It's giving Vince in 99, with the it's me, Austin, and the corporate ministry. Thanks for keeping me updated with your views and thoughts. Thank you, Cynthia. And by the way, people said this, and somebody put out a clip from one of the maybe the Van Vliet interview I did or something like that, where I specifically said that the stories now are better than the Attitude Era stories, and the stories now are better than the Attitude Era stories. People go, what about Austin and Vince? And it's like, what story of Austin and Vince? What specific? Because there are so many instances in the Austin and Vince story where you're just scratching your head going, what are you talking about? I swear. I said, Roman's heel turn was the best heel turn, and there are actually people who said no, it was when Austin turned heel at WrestleMania and hugged Vince. That was a terrible heel turn. That sucked. They couldn't even stick with it because everybody was like, this is never going to work. Why would Stone Cold turn heel? Nobody wants to boo Stone Cold. People really look at the Attitude. And the Attitude Era was great. I loved the Attitude Era. I love wrestling. I get why you were a fan of the Attitude Era. I was a fan of the Attitude Era. It's the best. I love going back and watching Attitude Era stuff. But nostalgia is such a hell of a drug. There are people who really sit there and go, when Vince McMahon revealed himself as the higher power, that was awesome. It wasn't awesome. When that happened, people were like, what? It was not awesome. It was clearly that they had been building up this higher power story and didn't know who the higher power was going to be. People were like, is Papa Shango going to come back? There are some rumors that it was going to be Christopher Daniels or something like that. And then it just turns out to be Vince. And you're like, wait. So you wanted to screw Austin. So you had the Undertaker kidnap your daughter. And then you tried to get your daughter back, but you weren't really even trying to get your daughter. None of it made any sense. Okay? So like you can watch this stuff on a highlight reel. Because you watch a highlight reel and you go, that's great. And then you watch week to week and you go, that's not as good as the highlight reel I just saw. Okay. Let me show you when the Union came out. When Vince McMahon was not in the corporation anymore, and Shane led the corporation, and then Vince led the Union. And tell me how great the Attitude Era stories were, okay? I get it. I'm not trying to besmirch the Attitude Era. It's my childhood, too. I get it, okay? My way. The lead up to WrestleMania 17 is the best. It's so awesome. The original run of Austin versus Vince is the best. It's so awesome. The story of Undertaker and Kane, it's the best. It's so awesome. But like the littlest infraction, you'll go, oh, Bloodline's over. Yet you'll tell me the Attitude Era is great when the Union came out and when the Higher Power was revealed. And those are great. Okay. All right. Well, you know what that tells me? You're not watching like I'm watching. Watch the product and tell me what I'm telling lies. I'm sorry. I just had to. But Cynthia, The Rock being behind Drew, Kevin Owens, the new bloodline, all that stuff, because he's so mad at Roman, that actually makes more sense than Vince being the higher power did. I don't know if it makes sense that he's behind all, but you know what? If that were the case, it would explain why Rock was so chummy with Drew McIntyre on Instagram Live. Everything counts. Kind of interesting, Cynthia. Kind of interesting. I appreciate the email. I appreciate all the emails. Appreciate you guys checking the podcast out every single week. Make sure you're checking it out every week. Make sure you're subscribed on all audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, SiriusXM app. Make sure you're watching the podcast every week as well as listening to it. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, Notsam Wrestling. Make sure that you're leaving comments, hitting like, telling all your friends about it. We're going to have a bonus episode. I can already tell you coming up this week. Mance Warner, old Manser from GCW, is going to be on Not Sam Wrestling in studio. We're probably going to have a reaction podcast to Saturday night's main event as well. It's a big time, and we're just here to provide content. And, of course, the live podcast coming up a week from Thursday in Indianapolis, Indiana at the Helium Comedy Club. Get your tickets. Go to notsam.com. Get those tickets. It's going to be a blast. I will see you there. Have a good one. Goodbye.